Welcome to Road Talk. We're here again. I'm filling in for Rocky this week.
He died in a car wreck, right?
Gosh, I hope not.
In one of the previous car talks, isn't that what happened?
No, he is sailing across the world, I think. He's on his month-long sabbatical, so no telling where he actually is on the globe right now. But we're starting a brand new series. This is the history of good and evil. And before we get too deep into that, just a fun question, icebreaker question for you, because I know you're a fan of not just public speaking and teaching, but comedy, right?
Sure.
You've done some stand-up comedy as well. So I wanted to know, I'm not even necessarily asking for a favorite comedian, but just like, what's your favorite style of comedy?
Oh man. Gosh, honestly, I don't think I have a favorite style at all. I just like people can make me laugh. And there's a lot of different things that can make me laugh. And so anybody that does that, and I just respect people. I respect all comedians, even if they're not great, because they're putting themselves out there. That was really what got me going in trying stand-up comedy. So I've performed 3 times now, I think. My next performance, I think it's going to be my wife's 40th birthday.
Wow,
She's requested me to perform. And then I may hang it up after that. But the thing that got me into is that we would watch.
Retirement.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to hang it up after that. We would watch those Netflix comedy specials. And, all the funny people are funny, all the big names. But then we would eventually get off the beaten path to just some random people we've never heard of and watch their thing. And I'd be like, well, that's not funny. He's not funny. She's not funny. And eventually I was just like, you know what? If you're going to say that, then like you do it.
Sure.
If you know what's funny enough.
You want to be like a backseat driver. You wanted to get up there and show.
And I'm just going to say, anybody on the camera here, anybody watching, is like, if there's something in the world that you observe that you can do better, do it.
There you go.
Do it. And it's possible it could be a new career or a business enterprise. But if nothing else, it's like, I don't know. It's so much better to substantiate your claims of superiority. Or you learn an appreciation.
On the wall.
You learn some appreciation for how hard it is. If nothing else, you respect those people a little bit more. And I will say both happen. I feel like I was funnier than some of those Netflix specials I watched. And also, I developed more of a respect for them. Can I just pause here and say you're already doing so much better than Rocky?
Well, hopefully Rocky's not watching. Just kidding, Rocky. We're not coming after you.
Not kidding.
So, speaking of kind of your interaction with the crowd, with the audience. So this week, every once in a while, we do like a pre-recorded message that will go to all the campuses, right? So everybody gets to hear the same person with the same exact message. And so this week was one of those. Was a pre-recorded video message. Does that make you more nervous? Like, do you long for the audience, instead of just playing to a camera?
No, not at all. I feel like of all the communicators on our team, that I'm on the higher end in terms of like I'm very dependent upon a crowd. That's why I love stand-up comedy, because I love telling a joke and boom, laughter or not laughter. And I love like just interacting with the crowd. And so when there's no crowd in the room, it's me and a camera and one camera operator or whatever. And so no, I don't like it.
Okay. So you would much rather the crowd.
Yeah. And I don't want to, like putting something out on video to all the campuses. It feels a little intimidating. So don't necessarily love it, but happy to do it.
If you're preaching somewhere with multiple services, right? Like you got multiple. If one wasn't so great, you got another shot at it.
Yeah, exactly.
This feels like one shot that will be immortalized across all the campuses.
I know, tough thing, and it better be good. It's on video. Better be good.
Yeah. Well, I know this is an excellent start to this series. Let me ask you this, because I know as y'all are planning just what we're going to talk about, this is specifically a series that's going to lead us all the way up to Easter. Why do you feel like this topic, the history of good and evil, is timely and just important for the church to hear right now? Like, what made you gravitate to this?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, this has been a series that has been baking in my mind now for the past few years, and I've tried to get it on the preaching schedule. You know, the whole team goes away and maps out what the series are going to be for the next year. And so I think this year, this was the third time I recommended this series. And the last 2 years, other things won out, but this time it made it onto the preaching calendar. And so it's been something that, I don't know, I've just been thinking about for a while. And I think there is something about it that is like prescient to this moment.
Yeah.
In history. And I'll talk about it a little bit in the intro of the sermon. I haven't preached the sermon yet. The sermon is not recorded. So I've got it written. I haven't
pulled the curtain back. They can't wrap their minds around how this timing works.
Yes. And so I think what I'm going to preach in the message is talking about how, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. You know, the 80s and 90s, Laura and I talk about this all the time. Is there a better time to have grown up as a kid?
I love it.
Than in the 80s and the 90s?
Yeah, that 90s, where most of my childhood was, I feel like, was such a sweet spot, you know?
Wasn't it? I wonder if every generation feels like that, and they feel like, man, I grew up in the best time to be a kid, or if that is something that is pretty exclusive to us millennials.
Yeah, I can't imagine this current generation feels like that.
Yeah, no, this is not the best time. So I think it really was a sweet spot in American history and maybe world history in that. So first of all, you were you're years removed from a serious international war conflict. Okay, so it's a time of peace, and then also the American economy was on the up and up, and so a lot of people are prospering and doing well, so more comfortable standard of living. Felt like it's on the heels of a lot of the civil rights movement, where it feels like we've sorted out a lot of the evil and racism and sexism in our world. And so, a lot of things that heading into the 80s and 90s, it feels like, oh man, we are headed in the right direction.
They had better cartoons.
Undoubtedly, better cartoons. What is your favorite cartoon?
Man, I was all about Captain Planet and the X-Men and Ninja Turtles.
Ninja Turtles, that's one of my favorites. Dennis the Menace was a great one for me as well. But, and so, you had all this in the 80s and 90s, and I don't know. This is spicy.
Are you about to say something controversial? I already feel it.
Yes, I don't really want it to. I think we're all there as America. Maybe I can kind of say it now. It kind of felt like in the 80s and 90s that America was kind of the light of the world, and like everyone else was kind of corrupt, and we were the good. We were the good guys and the forces of good in the world. Okay, and then like 2001. Then 2001 happened. And we're all instantly aware of terrorism, and that there are certain population in the world that don't see us as the good guys. And I would say since then, there has been a pulling back of the curtain. We've been introduced to other narratives of that. No, actually, there's a lot of corruption at home, and a lot of evil in our world today. And then you have the introduction of the internet and smartphones, people's pockets, and it's like, man, there's all sorts of evil and hatred and negativity just sitting in our pocket all day, or in our hands, where some people are consuming it for 5 hours, 8 hours a day. I just feel like, man, we grew up a little bit 80s and 90s. I think there's a lot of naivete to it, but it's kind of like the age of innocence, and we felt like things are so good. And so for us now as millennials and people who have lived through that, living in 2025, where it feels like evil is on full display and there's no avoiding it. And I just hear so many people, including secular people, non-Christian people, talking about, man, it feels like there's a battle between good and evil, and referencing evil. Well, where do you even get a concept for evil if it's not rooted in something spiritual and eternal? Who gets to say what is evil? So I think the moment that we are living in, a lot of even secular people feel like, oh my gosh, there is so much evil in the world. What is going on? They're looking for answers to it. So I think for all those reasons, this is a great moment to have this series, the history, and it's the history of good and evil. It's a compelling title. It's not just the history, it's also the future It's the history and future of good and evil because it's all recorded for us in the scripture. So anyway, those are just my thoughts. This is the first time that I'm putting them out there for anybody else. What do you think, Jerrod?
I definitely track with you. I mean, especially right now, like I feel like the conversation about evil is just more on the forefront than ever, you know, like even, you know, back in the 90s, we'd watch our cartoons, you know, there'd be an obvious villain or something, but to talk about people and forces that were evil, it just was less a conversation, I feel like. Maybe we were just oblivious to that, but like...
It's definitely way more of a caricature.
Yeah. Now it feels like that's so, like everyone's pointing the finger at everything of like, that's evil, you know, that's wicked, and so... No, I get you for sure.
Good. I'm glad it's at least resonating with this audience of one here.
Audience of one gets it. What about?
And so the other part of it, what I would just say about this, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no, you're
about this. The evil that I think the world is coming awake to right now in this moment, it's not just the result of what we know as scripture, as Christians, people who have studied the scriptures. What we know is that evil that we feel is not just the result of a couple bad apples who are screwing it up for the rest of humanity. There is something broader going on than one or two bad actors, one or two bad nations that are screwing it up for the rest of the world. Like we say, even America, that we were supposed to be, you know, we're supposed to be a nation founded upon
good guys,
faith in God, and good guys, and we come to the world's defense, and that, you know, it's so clear to see our nation's corruption and the corrupt practices we've had all over. I love America. I'm thankful for America, but you know, like that has been made obvious in recent years. And so it's not a one-off thing. It's systemic evil and good, and it's everywhere. And so it's not just a one-off thing. It's a broader thing that is going on and has been going on really for all of eternity. So that's the setup for this series, is that if it feels like things are really ramping up, that may be true. Things might be ramping up, which would mean that the end is possibly and soon coming. So there might be certain lulls and movements and fluidity in the war, but it's not one-off stuff. It's all connected. There's an arc that's going on that the scriptures tell us about.
Well, let's talk about Satan for a second.
Let's talk about Satan.
Because that's a big part of this series and what you talked about this week. But specifically, you talked about this idea that God created Satan, right? They're not equals.
Right.
Like God actually created him, and that something about that sentence I think is difficult for people to swallow when we say God created Satan. That's tough. So how can we reconcile with that? How do you help people? Like what's so hard about that for us to get, and why is that a problem?
Yes, God created Satan, but that's not how he originally created it. And so we just talked a couple weeks back in our series, Joseph, the life of Joseph, Divine Perspective, week 5. We talked that verse, Psalm 119:68, I believe it is. You are good and what you do is good. God has always only done good. Everything that God has brought forth has always only been good. And so whenever God create Satan? Yes, but that's not how it started out. It started out as an angel. We find out in Ezekiel 38 and Isaiah 14, I believe is where that passage is, that tells us that Satan was created by God as an angel, one of the good guys. He's one of the good guys originally. And somewhere along the way, he became prideful, full of himself, and he decided that he wanted to sit on the throne in heaven. He wanted to be God. He wanted to receive the worship of the other angels. And can I just say, I mean, I don't even know if I should say this because this is a rattling thought, but what scares me about that is like, man, if Satan did all that in heaven, we're all going to be in heaven someday. Man, I hope something like that doesn't unfold again.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. It's like, I've always, maybe you can help me with this. I've always wondered, because we talk about the origin of sin in the Garden of Eden, right? Like,
that's where the original sin.
The original sin. And I always wonder, what do you call what Lucifer did?
Exactly. Right.
Like, what was, I know he's not human, so that's different. But where did that come from?
Yeah.
You know?
Totally agree. Yeah, we talked about that, or I'm going to talk about that in the message about how really what happened in heaven with Satan, with Lucifer, was the original sin.
Yeah.
And then in a lot of ways, what played out in the garden was just an extension of that original sin,
sure.
which we see again. But, I think that idea that you initially led with there, I think it is really important to just know that Satan and God are not spiritual equals. And so we're talking about the battle between good and evil. And in our world today, at certain times, it can feel overwhelming, all the evil. And it can feel like evil is winning. And in other moments in history, I imagine, in the world wars and genocide that's happened,
and World War II a lot, and I think, what did they think about the world?
Right.
Did they think this is the end of the world and evil's winning,
And so sometimes I think we have that thought, is that it can just feel like evil is winning.
Yeah, for sure.
But to understand that just the mere fact that God created Satan is representative that God is superior to Satan. They are not equals. Satan is inferior, and so we don't have to fear Satan and his power, because the power of God is greater. It's like the verse, I use this in a message as well, that says, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. And I think there's a couple of different interesting things about that, and I'll bring them out in the message, is that first of all, God is in you, and God is the supreme power and force in the world. So God is in you, and he's ultimate power. And secondly, Satan's not in you. Now, Satan can be we believe in demonic possession, and that the devil could possess people and will and has, but not for believers. For a believer who has the Holy Spirit of God, has God inside of them, that Satan cannot possess them because God possesses them. So as a believer, he who is in you, God, ultimate power, is greater than he who is in the world. And so what that personally means for us is there will be some places where Satan is really effective at accomplishing his evil plans that he is trying to accomplish. But in your life personally, just to know, as a believer, follower of Jesus Christ, that God's power is greater, and it's inside of you, and you don't have to live defeated. You don't have to succumb to evil, and we all deal with evil, and we all can be tempted. Satan can tempt us even as believers, but he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. And so, and that's really what a lot of this series is about, just to kind of set the table here. Yeah. What we're going to see, we see it in week 1 in the whole series. Satan is powerful, and he's not to be messed around with. You do not want to mess around with him. You do not want to play around with him.
You shouldn't go provoke.
You don't want to listen to him. You don't want to provoke him. You don't want to have a conversation with him. It's like, so Satan is not to be messed with, but God is supreme. God is victorious, and we know exactly how it's all going to work out. And in your life, you can live a victorious life as well. And that's ultimately where we're going in this series. And look, we're back on the Forney campus. So that's where this conversation has to end.
I was going to ask you a loaded question. We can park for a second. It's okay. Do you think people are too scared of Satan or not scared enough?
Yeah, I would say it just depends upon the person. I think obviously you would probably say the same thing, that there are some people that give way too much credit and defer way too much to him and his power. And then there are people who they think Satan doesn't even really exist, or if he does exist, he's a cartoon character.
Sure.
Say, yeah, he's not either one of those things. He is very real, and he is very powerful. This is one of the things we mentioned in first 2 weeks of this series, is that another thing that boggles my mind is Satan somehow convinced a third of the angels to go with him. Angels created by God, seen God in heaven, worshiped God as God, and somehow a third, not one or two, a third were influenced by Satan. So, that tells us, once again, we just have no business messing around with him.
So I was going to say, what's your advice then just for the church at large, right, as we're trying to navigate good and evil, right, and just navigate these things, and here are these good, holy beings that God creates, these messengers of light that are these angels, and we see yet Lucifer allows pride, maybe that's going to be the key here, but he allows pride to make these wrong choices, to reject God. What are we to do? What's kind of your advice for us as we start this series, as we go into this idea of good and evil? What's your you're imparting wisdom here.
Man, yeah, I don't know. I'm still writing the series. That's a great question. I honestly would have to think about that for a little while to come up with an answer that I loved. But I think really at the end of the day, that step one is being aware that there is something broader, bigger, eternal, and spiritual going on. There are spiritual forces at play in our world. So step number one for a believer to live a victorious life is just to know that that's there. And just the awareness that it's happening is going to change how you see so much of what's happening in your life. And so I would say that's where to start. And then in the coming weeks, we're going to unpack all of this a little bit more, that I think with every week, you're going to see just how victorious Christ is over Satan, and then how much victory that imparts to you as well. We're going to see in this series, I've never heard anybody else say this. Maybe it's said everywhere, or maybe this is heretical. I don't know. But just from my preliminary study for the series, I think we see Satan over the course of eternity. I think we see him thrice defeated.
Okay.
3 times defeated.
Okay.
Not once, not twice, but 3 times defeated. And so this one in heaven, it's his first defeat.
Okay. All right. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for chatting with me in the car today. Enjoyed our road
You're a great
talk.
driver. You're even a better driver than Rocky.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad we didn't wreck then.